up with intractable epilepsy, which means I kept seizing even though I took drugs. But I also grew up a violinist, and those seizures started when I was 3. I started in status epilepticus, which is one grand mal seizure after another. It's how people die. But I obviously got to an emergency room fast enough, and we got those babies down to one side. Most of the time from there on out, not all of the time, but most of the time, seizures were on the right and in the limbic system of the brain. So they started with really strong emotion. That happens with a lot of temporal lobe epilepsy. Some people have ecstasy, and mine got to be terror. So my seizures would start on the horizon. You know, hit here, just this absolute eeriness that something was coming with intent to kill. And as it spread up and out, the world just it got closer. So the world got less and less safe. And if the seizure jumped to the other side and it attacked me completely, then something came with real force from the left and got me. So my seizures, I lived these different levels of fear from eeriness to terror for almost 30 years, or a little over 30 years, but fortunately, it was only part of my life. Because within a year and a half of starting to seize, my mother introduced me, started me playing the piano and dancing, looking for where my strengths were, and she entered me into a world of beauty and order, which goes a long way if your own brain is attacking you. I want to play for you a lovely example of beauty, and Eric Miller is the person who drew us together, all these musicians, and I want to play this. I'm going to play this to Eric and Caroline. It's about what we are. I was just very fortunate. When the press came at me a lot, they asked my mother, why, if your daughter had this problem, would you send her down that road of music? Of course, that question is why, if your daughter could seize at any moment, would you put her on stage? And my mother was really good. She was on camera, and she said, you know, at age 3, I could just see doors slam in her face. And I just did anything I could to start opening those doors. And to me later, that was such a good answer, to me later she said, what I wanted to say was what? She would have been better off convulsing as a waitress? That's my mom. I switched to the violin at age 9, and that put me in an orchestra. And in an orchestra I could really develop my passionate love for life, which was what it was going to take. I went through some great schooling, and I just kind of seized my way through on toxic levels of drugs, and ended up at the Eastman School of Music, which I really wanted to go to that school. At that school, I was seizing a lot, and so a new drug was added, and I graduated with honors, but I don't know how many folks have tried to read and comprehend on high doses of phenobarbital, but it's not real simple. So what I did was I had to come up with other strategies to get A's in these classes, because I had to forever be somebody who was unarguable. I mean, I had to be someone they couldn't say that you don't belong here. So I sat in the front row and I just took stream of consciousness notes. I mean, I just wrote as fast as I could, and then I made my own. I never read the book. I made my own outlines, and outlines can be real rhythmic. And so I made my own outlines and memorized them, and went into classes and during tests and just kind of danced my way through the outline. And it really is possible to put information in a different part of your body. So to figure out, though, I mean, I was always having to come up with, nobody says, oh, you're having seizures, let me help you get through the Eastman School of Music. So to find the strategies that were going to work for me, I always went into a mirror, because in the mirror you get to see the eyes who actually know your story. You don't have to explain anything, you don't have to make anybody feel better, you don't have to take judgment from the outside world, just you're there with yourself. And I could talk and cry and coach myself forward, and I could always end with, come on, I love you, let's go. So by graduation from Eastman, I was seizing on stage visibly. They were kind of So I knew nobody was going to, that senior year, I figured out no one was going to pay me a full-time salary to seize during their performances. That was a good guess. But I did figure out that there are, and I had to do another fast maneuver, there are part-time orchestras in this country. There are a lot of them. And they're fully professional, but they don't pay as much money because they don't play as often. They're part-time. And I was raised in a capitalist country. I knew bottom line is money. And I also knew that these would be cheaper seizures for management, and that at that price, people should really have to cope. There were, you know, I got knocked down a lot of times because life is not linear, as we've figured out, right, by this time. And so I simply redefined success every time I had to. Because think of it, there's no reason to leave the definition of success up to somebody else. So I auditioned for part-time orchestras and won, and therefore I had to walk out and never told anybody that I might seize. Never once breathed the word epilepsy. Because I won. I'd walk out knowing I could seize and just taught my stand partner what to do. I didn't say it would be a seizure. I just said, you know, if I start playing garbage and my eyes look kind of glassy and I say funky stuff, just get my bow off the string, put the violin on the floor in front of me, and I'll be back. And sure enough, I mean, this happened a number of times. And one of the more famous ones was, well, Malcolm Franger was on stage, a real famous guy, playing the Beethoven Emperor Concerto. And I kind of, when I got a little unfocused is when I seized, and the slow movement is real drawn out, and I started to go, but when I started that impending doom, I never knew how far it was going to go, and so I just kept playing. But there came a point when I sort of noticed that the conductor was conducting and the people were playing, and I looked down, and sure enough, my violin was on the floor, and I grabbed that thing. As soon as I could hear my own brain say, you can do it, I know you can do it, I always just grabbed the instrument and finished the piece. Because it put me right back into the passion of Beethoven. I mean, from the terror of being killed to this gorgeous, gorgeous music. And, you know, that consciousness, unimpaired consciousness is really very, very powerful. It enables a person to do great things, to affect the world real well. So this went on for years, and I played 4 different orchestras in 3 different states, unable to drive. But you know what? People will help. That's one of the cool things about something this crazy, is that you do have to learn that there are people who will help. And life changed, though, real big, in April of 1990 when they spread Grand Mal 4 times in a month and landed me on the floor on stage 3 times that month. And this is going to fall. And within a couple of months, I was sitting in front of Hans Lüders, who is a real hot epileptologist, a real famous guy, the Cleveland Clinic, and he was my 11th neurologist in life. I moved a lot. I didn't really fire 10 guys, just a few. But this man, I didn't have to go in and say, you know, I can't see 3 times a day because my eyes are jiggling and I see double. He just looked in my eyes and his heart broke. And he saw the toxicity in my eyes, and he just looked at me and said, Martha, how do you see the music? And I fell in love, because this man cared about what I cared about. He was the only person who ever figured out my driving force was my music. So I gave him the gig. He put me, all my EEGs, my brainwave tests were normal. And so he put me in the monitoring unit where they watch it 24 hours a day for days. They put like 40 electrodes on my head and then 2 through the jaws, because then they got electrodes inside. And, you know, they take out all your meds and watch you convulse for days. And what they figured out is that there was interruptal spiking. There were bad spikes almost 24 hours a day, which made sense to me because I knew how weird my landscape was, as it were. But nobody else had to know the extreme extent of it. But I had been practicing Sibelius and Bach in the monitoring unit while I was sort of incarcerated there. And so he knew I could really play the instrument. And he came only, you know, to the doorway and said, it is the right, because they were all starting from the right to below. He was on uncharted waters, he said, because he'd never done a professional musician. I said, chart the waters. And the next test, they shut down my right brain, anesthetized the right brain, so they could just talk to the left side and see it new all by itself, and then they shut down the left and just talk to the right. And one thing we discovered is that I couldn't perceive music with my right brain. With my left brain turned off, they played me a piece. It was 4 bad chords, and I had no idea there was melody. So it made me cry my heart out, but they were thrilled, of course, because that meant I was operable, that they were going to give it a whirl, because chances were, at least there, that we wouldn't lose the music. So going forward, I did have a nurse clinician come to me and say, the real risk is the music still. You have more to lose than most people. I said, yeah, but think about it. For that reason, because I have so much, I have more to gain than anybody here. And I went forward. Well, the first surgery lasted for a very long time, but right out of intensive care, my next slide is what's very cool here. Next slide. Yeah. I first played solo Bach because it's the hard. They kept telling me that they were worried about music memory. So I played Bach because it's the hardest stuff to do for memory. And I opened my eyes to look at my husband and mother, who were both musicians, to see if I played what I thought I played. Because that was my big hope, is that what I was playing is what I was perceiving. And then I looked at the surgeon, and he had only breathed in and not out. And all I could think was drop his jaw, Curtis. You just made him a very famous man. And I stood up and played part of the Sibelius Violin Concerto just to watch his face. It was really fun. And I hit the first big cadence, and he looked at me and said, "That is so wonderful, Martha. We were just wondering if you would know what to do with a bow." Music memory is the memory there is music, and that you've ever related to it before in your life. They were wondering if I would open the case that was handed to me and not have any idea what it was. I looked at him and just said, "It's in my joints." He was unimpressed, but I thought it was. So I was still, I was still playing. But I also started seizing again. So we did another surgery, and I started seizing again. They were going very cautiously because they didn't really know what would happen. Second surgery, started seizing again. And then the surgeon did not want to go any further because now we were in a very deep part of the brain. And I went to the mirror and said, "Come on, you can do this. I know you can do this." And then convinced my doctor, who was head of neurology, that I wanted to go forward, and so he was the only person in the building who could cause the surgeon to have to do it. And at which point, the next slide is cool. If you give me the next slide. Next slide. There. Then they put the electrodes right on the brain, and that way they can, there are 12 electrodes. That 3x4 grid is on the piece of temporal lobe that's left, and then the other ones are wrapped around the inside. If you show the next slide, we have, I love this one, because you can see those are my eyeballs, and then the stuff, the little dots behind that right eye are the fifth one in was the only one seizing still. It was on a piece of amygdala. It was still firing at me, and which was bad news to the surgeon because that was the piece that was so deep. But he came to me the night before the next surgery when he was going to take out the hardware and hopefully take some more brain. He showed me a scan and he said, "Martha, here's the piece. Here is your optic nerve." And I could see the optic nerve right next to what he wanted to take. "I could so easily blind you tomorrow." And I said, "Don't do that. It's going to be okay. I'm here because you're really good." I knew I could see the optic nerve on a scan. He could see the optic nerve. But then he was a little dumbstruck, and he said, "What you can't see on the scan are the blood vessels." And it was right next to the set of blood vessels that feeds the whole right brain. What he was really afraid of was downing my whole left side, was losing the strength of his left. And then he said, touch wood, this has never happened to me. And I said, you know what? Don't do it. It's going to be okay. You'll be all right. I just wanted to steady the guy because he was going to be holding the knife. And, you know, people sometimes will say, I can't believe you had to coach your own surgeon. And I thought, you know what? I wanted him to be okay. And sometimes you just really have to be that involved in your own life. So we went through that one, and I won. I don't seize anymore. I haven't seized for years at this point. And yeah, the next slide shows you what the brain looks like today. Yeah, that big black hole, it's my eyes and nose at the top. The big black hole is a big black hole. And a little kid in, you know, everyone's had a water unit like by 3rd and 4th grade. And they always, little kids ask, what's in it? Well, it fills in with water. And in Birmingham, Alabama, I was down there and a little kid in the front said, if you knock on this side of your head, does it sound the same as when you knock on there? I just love that question. It's because they're just trying to, they've all blown on bottles with water, right? So they want to know, you know, how did you face all those surgeries? And really, it was a pure desire to go beyond mere survival. It's really hard to have your brain attacking you. And I wanted to thrive. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to play. I wanted a life that I wanted to live. And, you know, if you look into a mirror, this is doable. You look into a mirror, you'll see the most beautiful eyes in the world. They're the ones that actually know your story. They don't argue back and tell you you shouldn't feel bad or that you shouldn't feel the way you feel. And, of course, you know, we all need to put people around us who can listen and then put something beautiful in your life. It's not a frill, it's a human need. I'm totally convinced. It takes incredible drive to live up against an attack from your own brain, to keep going and trying to coexist in the world with something wonderful. But I want to end by playing what that sounds like. This is a part of a very long piece. It's just a few minutes of the Bach Chaconne. And it sounds like to me, this is my yes I can mantra. And at first you'll hear, you know, the sort of wandering, the musing through the brain, wondering sort of what to do and trying to walk around everybody else. And by the middle though, you're hearing yes I can. You'll hear yes I can. And it goes then, it intensifies to, oh yes I can, and it just drives to the victory.